A man stands on the limestone steps of the Temple Mount, the blue thread of his prayer fringe dragging lightly in the dust. A blind man washes mud from his eyes, and they interrogate his parents. A woman wets the feet of a rabbi with her tears. Jesus steps away from the grand theological debates of the temple courtyard and moves straight into the dirt of the garden. He delivers the fourth tragedy. Woe to you, woe to you, because you tithe your mint, your dill, and your cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. Picture the physical reality of this for a moment. You are standing in the sun, pinching the tiny, rough seeds of cumin between your fingers. You are snapping off individual, fragrant green leaves of mint. You count out exactly 9 for yourself, and you place the 10th in a basket for God. You are incredibly, flawlessly precise. You ensure the math is perfect so that your conscience can remain clean. It is intoxicating to live this way. Metrics make us feel safe. You can measure exactly 10% of your paycheck. You can measure how many days you attended a service this year. You can count the chapters you read this morning. You can track your spiritual performance on a spreadsheet and prove to everyone, including yourself, that you are doing it right. But how do you measure mercy? How do you quantify justice in a broken system? How do you put a percentage on faithfulness when you are sitting in the dark? And they recoil in disgust. Same collision, again and again. But if you look closer at the historical dust covering these men, feeling absolutely nothing, and choosing to trust God anyway, you cannot. And so, if you are anything like the Pharisees, you focus obsessively on the things you can count, so you do not have to confront the things you lack. Jesus watches them carefully, straining their wine through a cloth, catching a tiny, unclean gnat, while completely ignoring the fact that they are swallowing a camel. The meticulous tithe is not an act of obedience. It is a camouflage. It is the illusion of godliness, purchased with pocket change and garden herbs, while the heavy, unquantifiable work of actually loving people is left entirely undone. And then he delivers the 5th and 6th woes. They are almost identical, and they hit even closer to home. I to you, woe to you, because you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You wash your hands. You scrub the bronze cups until they shine in the sunlight, feeling the cold metal under your thumbs. You present a pristine, polished exterior to everyone in your community. You say the right words. You post the right verses. You cultivate an image of total devotion. But Jesus looks past the bronze and sees the extortion. The cleanliness is not a reality. It is a costume. He is begging the religious elite at why they formed. At the exact nature of their endless arguments with the carpenter from Nazareth, you start to see something. And anyone watching today who has mastered the art of looking holy to clean the inside of the cup first, to let the private reality match the public projection. But it is the final warning that leaves a permanent scar on religious history. Because Jesus looks out at the monuments surrounding the city, and he finally uses the word that will define them forever. The spring wind blows across the limestone ridges of the Mount of Olives. Passover is only days away. Thousands of weary pilgrims walk the dusty roads toward Jerusalem, carrying the smell of the road and the anticipation of the festival. And scattered along those hillsides are graves. To protect the pilgrims, the Pharisees have hired men to coat the stone tombs in fresh white lime. If a traveler accidentally brushes against a grave, they become ceremonially unclean for 7 days. They would miss the Passover meal, so the religious leaders paint the tombs blinding, immaculate white, making them visible in the harsh afternoon sun. Jesus points directly at these gleaming monuments. He delivers the final, devastating tragedy. Woe to you, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. And then he uses the word that will cement their legacy forever. He calls them the Greek hypocrites. The cartoon villain reading completely misses. The conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees is not a battle between the righteous and the wicked. You read it in English as hypocrites. But the word he uses in Matthew 23:27 does not originally mean a liar or a deceiver. The noun Hippocrates comes straight from the ancient Greek amphitheater. It literally translates to an actor. Or more specifically, one who answers from beneath a mask. In the first-century Roman world, a Hippocrates would step onto a wooden stage holding a massive, oversized, painted mask over their face. They were performers. They recited a script written by someone else, projecting their voice through the carved mouth of a fictional character to entertain a crowd. That theatrical route changes everything about this confrontation. When Jesus calls the Pharisees hypocrites, he is not accusing them of being secret, mustache-twirling villains. He is accusing them of treating the kingdom of God like a stage play. He is diagnosing a performance. It is the exact same word he uses back in Matthew 6, when he talks about men who sound trumpets in the synagogues before they give to the poor, or men who stand on the street corners reciting long, beautiful prayers. They are wearing the mask of devotion to receive the applause of the audience. A hypocrite is not someone who struggles to obey God and fails. It is someone who uses obedience as a costume. Jesus looks at the men in their phylacteries. It is a tragedy of two colliding kingdoms. Jesus did not save his most terrifying, blistering words, the 7 woes of Matthew 23. And then he looks at the brilliant white graves shining on the hillside. He binds the two images together in one fatal sentence. You are like whitewashed tombs, he says. Beautiful on the outside, immaculate, perfect, but inside, you are full of dead men's bones. The religion is not a sanctuary. It is a beautifully painted graveyard. The mask is flawless, but the man underneath it is suffocating. And the absolute heartbreak of this chapter is that 2,000 years later, the stage is still open, and we are still putting on the paint. We do not wear heavy leather boxes on our foreheads today. We do not hire men to paint tombs with wet, stinging lime before the spring festivals. But the Hippocrates did not die in the 1st century. The actor just changed stages. Today, the stage might be a brightly lit sanctuary, with padded chairs and the low hum of an air conditioner. The mask is a perfectly curated social media feed, a flawless church attendance record, a theological vocabulary that signals to everyone in the room that you belong to the correct, undefiled tribe. You smile in the church foyer, shaking hands over lukewarm coffee, pretending your internal world is not quietly burning to the ground. The danger of the Pharisees is not that they were uniquely evil men. The danger is that their exact same instinct lives inside every single one of us. For the pagan Romans who nailed his countrymen to trees, he did not save them for the corrupt Sadducees who turned the temple into a marketplace. When we are terrified that God might not actually love us in our brokenness, we build a fence. We substitute intimacy with accuracy. We memorize the right doctrines. We tithe the exact percentage. We measure the theological mint and cumin, arguing over the correct interpretation of secondary texts in the cold glow of a laptop screen, while completely ignoring the neighbor whose life is collapsing right across the street. We clean the outside of the cup until it catches the light. But the tragedy of wearing a mask is that a mask cannot be loved. If you construct a flawless religious persona, people might applaud you. They might give you a title. They might hand you a microphone, but the applause is for the character you are playing, not the person you actually are. You carry the weight of the act in your jaw and your shoulders. You are left entirely alone behind the paint, exhausted from the performance, terrified that someone might find out. You do not actually have it all together. The mask is not a spiritual shield. It is a theological prison. Jesus did not pronounce those 7 woes to condemn the Pharisees. He pronounced the ouai to shatter the mask. He was trying to rescue them from the phantom religion they had built, a system that demanded perfection but offered zero grace. He saved his absolute fiercest warnings for the most devoted, Bible-believing, morally uncompromising men in all of Israel. The question is, why? He was weeping over men who had barricaded themselves so deeply behind their own rules that they could not even recognize God when he was standing right in front of them, breathing the dust of their own city. And that is why the 7 warnings matter. They are not just historical artifacts. They are the anatomy of a collision that echoes across the centuries, leaving behind a pattern that we desperately need to remember. They built a massive fence to protect the ancient texts and shut the kingdom door in the faces of the desperate. They crossed oceans to win a single convert and created a mirror of their own pride. They measured the gold resting on the altar and completely missed the God who sat on the throne. They tithed the tiny green leaves of garden mint and left mercy dying in the dirt. They scrubbed the outside of the bronze cup and drank from a well of internal greed. They painted the limestone graves blinding white and suffocated among the dead men's bones. They wore the flawless mask of the actor and missed the Messiah, standing right in front of them. Same tragedy, same warning. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the answer changes how you read every single confrontation they ever had. It forces you to look at the religious systems we build today. Sound of that original word. Way. A guttural, agonizing wail. Jesus did not look at the men with the heavy leather, boxes strapped to their arms. The men who had turned his Father's house into a spreadsheet of purity laws. And hate them. He grieved them. He wept over the exact people who were actively plotting his murder. He saw the exhausting, crushing weight of their performance. And his heart broke for the men trapped inside the costume. If you are in a season where your faith feels more like an exhaustion of metrics than a relationship, if you are carefully counting your mint and cumin, scrubbing your exterior, and secretly terrified that you are failing, the invitation is to drop the mask. The kingdom is not a stage, it is a sanctuary. It does not require you to hold the theological high ground, and it does not require your cup to be perfectly polished before you sit at the table. It only requires you to bring the reality of your actual, unpainted life into the light. And may the God who sees straight through the whitewashed stone meet you in the quiet, uncurated places of your life, and give you the courage to finally take off the paint and ask what exactly we are protecting. Jesus did not clash with the Pharisees because their theology was pagan. He clashed with them. If this opens something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from religious performance. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, because they were sitting in the exact same house, reading the exact same text, yet building a completely different empire. He has not eaten since sunrise. His hands smell of olive oil, ink, and old parchment. He knows the Torah, every scroll, every law, every syllable by heart. To feel the weight of this collision, you cannot start in the pages of the Gospels. You have to go back to a moment of blood and silence, 2 centuries before the word hypocrite ever left the mouth of Christ. The year is roughly 167 BC. The Seleucid king, Antiochus Epiphanes, marches his army into Jerusalem. He outlaws circumcision. He burns the ancient scrolls in the dirt streets. And, in the ultimate act of desecration, he slaughters a pig on the great bronze altar of the temple. The smell of roasting, unclean meat fills the Holy of Holies. It is an apocalypse. The Jewish people are fractured. Many of the elite priests in Jerusalem compromise to survive. They wear Greek robes. They build gymnasiums in the shadow of the Temple Mount, the scraping of Greek sandals drowning out the chanting of the Psalms. But a small, radical group of men look at the ashes of their religion and make a vow: never again. They conclude that the exile, the occupation, and the slaughter happened for one singular reason. Israel forgot the Torah. The people compromised their boundaries and absorbed the culture around them. To ensure this never happens again, these men decide to build an impenetrable fence around the law. They take the name Perushim. The root is the Hebrew verb parash. It means to divide, to declare distinctly, to separate. When he gives to the poor, and he calculates the exact tenth of his garden herbs, down to the last mint leaf, we know them in English as the Pharisees. They were not the villains of their story. They were the resistance. Their separation was not born of arrogance. It was born of collective trauma. When you realize this, their obsession with rules stops looking like legalism and starts looking like desperation. If the Torah says, "Do not work on the Sabbath," the parish mindset says, we need 39 subcategories of what constitutes work. If we never carry a burden, if we never tie a knot, if we never walk more than 1,000 paces, we will never even come close to breaking the actual commandment. Distance becomes safety. Separation becomes holiness. By the time Jesus is born, the Pharisees are the undisputed heroes of the common people. They are the ones who preserved the faith when the temple was bought and sold by Roman politicians. They are the ones meeting in local synagogues, teaching the scriptures, holding the line against the crushing weight of the Roman Empire. They wear their devotion on their bodies, strapping heavy leather boxes, containing the scripture to their foreheads and their arms. And yet, when the Messiah they had been praying for finally arrives, he does not applaud their fences. He begins tearing them down. He heals on their days of rest. He touches the lepers they banished, ensuring he never robs God of a single fraction of devotion. He is not a corrupt politician. He is not a wealthy priest. He eats the bread they deemed unwashed. And the part that makes this remarkable is where he chooses to strike first. A man with a withered hand stands in the synagogue. The skin is tight, the tendons pulled and frozen. The Pharisees watch. They do not watch with compassion. They watch with legal precision. It is the Sabbath. Healing is work. Will he break the fence? Jesus speaks. The man stretches out his hand. The tendons loosen. The skin softens. The Pharisees leave the room. They begin plotting his death. A few days later, Levi throws a feast. The tables are crowded. You can hear the clinking of Roman coins and the loud, unregulated laughter of men who have sold out their country. The room smells of roasted meat and spilled wine. Jesus sits right in the middle of it, breaking bread. The Pharisees stand outside. They refuse to cross the threshold. They pull their robes tight against the dust. They ask the disciples why their rabbi eats with human refuse. A few chapters after that, a woman is thrown into the dirt. The crowd gathers. Men grip rough, heavy limestone in their palms. They wait for his ruling. He traces his finger in the dust. The stones hit the ground. A hand stretches out. A mat is rolled up. A blind man blinks at the sun. A stone drops in the dirt. Same collision. Over and over. Who bought his position with Roman silver? He is a working-class scholar, a man who loves the ancient text so desperately. It happens over meals. It happens over hand-washing. It happens over who can be touched and who must be exiled. His miracles are not just acts of mercy. They are acts of trespassing. Every time Jesus heals on a Saturday, every time he shares a cup with a traitor, every time he lets a bleeding woman touch his cloak, he is dismantling the parish. He is dismantling the separation. The Pharisees spent 200 years building a wall to keep the profane out. Jesus walks straight through it to get the people trapped on the other side. The Pharisees believe that holiness is fragile. They believe that if you touch a leper, the impurity transfers to you. If you touch a sinner, the sin transfers to you. Holiness must be quarantined. Jesus operates on a completely different physics. He believes holiness is contagious. When he touches the leprosy does not infect him. His purity infects the leper. He does not need a fence. He is the source. The tension builds for 3 years. The arguments escalate. The traps are set and evaded. Every miracle is a sledgehammer to their walls. Every parable is a mirror they refuse to look into. Finally, the friction reaches its breaking point. It is his last week in Jerusalem. The cross is only days away. He stands in the temple courts, surrounded by the crowds, and looks directly at the men with the leather boxes strapped to their foreheads. He delivers the 7 woes of Matthew 23 that he has structured every waking second of his life around keeping it undefiled. You have probably grown up hearing his title used as a slur, 7 terrifying warnings to the religious elite. But the word he uses to begin these warnings changes the entire tone of the chapter. Read Matthew chapter 23 inches, any modern English translation, and it sounds like a thunderstorm. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. In English, it reads like a curse. We picture Jesus finally losing his temper. We assume the gentle teacher of the Galilee has finally snapped. After 3 years of constant theological sabotage, after endless interrogations about Sabbath law and hand-washing, we read this chapter and assume he has decided to burn the religious house down with pure, unvarnished rhetoric. You can almost visualize the veins standing out on his neck, his voice bouncing off the massive limestone pillars of the courtyard, the sharp smell of sacrificial smoke drifting past his shoulders. But the detail that changes everything is the sound of the word itself. The word Jesus repeats 7 times to begin these warnings is the Greek oi. It is technically not even a word. It is an onomatopoeia, a sound meant to imitate a physical reality. The Greek writers were trying to capture the ancient Hebrew prophetic syllable of hoi. It is a primal, guttural cry that originates in the back of the throat. It is the sound a mother makes when she collapses into the dirt next to a casket. It translates less like a fiery damn you. If someone calls you a Pharisee today, it means you are a hypocrite. It means you are rigid, legalistic, the undisputed villain of the New Testament, and more like a devastated alas. The absolute horror of what is happening. The Apostle John uses this exact same sound in Revelation 18. When the merchants of the earth stand far off and watch the great city of Babylon burning to ash, they weep and mourn, crying out, "Way, way, the great city." They are not cursing the city. They are mourning its permanent destruction. That phonetic reality changes everything about the climax of this conflict. When Jesus stands in the temple and pronounces 7 woes upon the religious elite, he is not screaming in hatred. He is wailing in heartbreak. The 7 woes are not an executioner's sentence. They are a funeral dirge. If hearing the grief beneath the anger in this text stirs up questions you have never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the original languages than you knew was possible. So Jesus begins the eulogy for a religion that has lost its soul. He looks directly at the men who sacrificed everything to keep the scriptures pure, and he diagnoses the disease they do not even realize they have. He lists 7 specific symptoms, 7 fatal errors that happen whenever we value the purity of the system more than the people the system was designed to heal. And the first 3 warnings target exactly how they managed to lock the doors of heaven from the inside. Most people assume the Pharisees were the obvious antagonists, standing in the shadows from the very beginning, waiting to sabotage the Son of God. He stands in the temple courtyard. The midday sun beats down on the white limestone. He looks at the scholars. He delivers the first tragedy. Woe to you, woe to you, because you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. They hold the keys. They stand at the gate, but they do not enter. Worse, they block the path for everyone else. They have created a theological system so complex, so heavy with purity codes and required rituals, that a working-class fisherman or a desperate widow cannot possibly measure up. They stand blocking the entrance, demanding a perfection they cannot even achieve themselves. The kingdom is not an exclusive fortress for the undefiled. It is an open door for the desperate. He does not stop. He delivers the second tragedy. Woe to you, woe to you, because you travel across sea and land to make a single convert. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. A Pharisee boards a Roman merchant ship. He smells the bitter salt water. He travels hundreds of miles across the Mediterranean. He finds a pagan seeking the one true God. He teaches this convert the Torah. He teaches him exactly how to wash his hands, exactly how to trim his beard, exactly how to keep the Sabbath fence intact. And they did oppose him. A paralyzed man rolls up his mat on a Saturday, and they demand a legal investigation. And Jesus says it creates a monster. The convert adopts all the legalistic arrogance of the system without any of the historical trauma that originally created it. The convert learns the rules, but never learns the God behind the rules. He continues, "The third tragedy. Way to you. Blind guides. They sit in the courtyards and debate religious loopholes. They act like spiritual accountants. If a man swears an oath by the heavy stone walls of the temple, the oath is void. If he swears by the blinding gold covering the sanctuary doors, the oath is binding. If he swears by the great bronze altar, he is free. If he swears by the bloody, roasted sacrifice resting on the altar, he is trapped." Jesus exposes the absolute absurdity of their math. The gold is not holy because it shines. It is holy because it belongs to the temple. The gift is not sacred because it costs money. It is sacred because it sits on God's altar. They measure the gold, but miss the glory. They obsess over the contract, but completely miss the covenant. These first three warnings tear down the massive. Systemic borders the religious elite have built around God. They expose a leadership that is legally brilliant, but spiritually blind. But the fourth warning shifts the focus. Jesus moves away from the grand theological debates of the temple, stepping straight into the dirt of their own gardens. If you have ever felt the crushing exhaustion of trying to measure your own righteousness, this fourth warning is where you need to sit.